In regard to this report, which was published on the 29th of June 2012, I'd like to specifically highlight how it impacts on my constituency and on the Ballylongford Land Bank. The Ballylongford Land Bank, unbeknownst to many people in this House and this country, is the second deepest water port in the entirety of Europe. And unfortunately, it has been the subject of many false dawns to date. In the 1970s, Aran Energy were looking at building an oil refinery on this said piece of land. The state, with some foresight, has taken a land bank of some 600 acres there, which, if it was in existence in any other part of Europe, would be the site of great industry and great employment. With review and respect, I must say that I'm disappointed with not so much the findings, but more so how this is all played out from 2001 to date. And if I could chronologically highlight how this is played out. In 2001, the then Minister for Enterprise decided that we needed to have a new interconnector between Ireland and the UK with a capacity to transport 22 million cubic meters of gas per day. And it went ahead and was built, and in 2002 the regulator took control of the market. And if I can refer back to the European Economic Intelligence Unit, the report done by the Department of the Taoiseach in 2009, our regulatory status is one of independence and a public agency. The table reveals considerable variety in the legal status of European regulators and the independence of the energy regulators. In Ireland and Portugal, they are independent public agencies. And to that end, complete responsibility lies with the independent regulator, who is not only in name but also in actions, and has highlighted that to date. There are consequences for the regulator when he makes judgments that are deemed to be inappropriate. And I'd like the Minister to highlight how he can ask the judiciary, if needs be, to rule on this, and how we can act within the European Commissioner's regulations also. I think we need to look at the fact that in 2005, the regulator decided that a tariff regime was needed for external sources, because at that time we had 95% of our gas coming in from the interconnectors, and we had 5% of our gas coming in from Kinsale, obviously all state-owned interconnectors, and the ring main was being used. Corrib was coming on stream, and at that time the regulator was under no illusion, but he had to put a tariff in place. In 2006, Hess Engineering, along with Shannon LNG, looked at developing the Ballylongford site for the purposes of a gas LNG plant, which would bring an investment of between 600 million and 1 billion euros to our country. Foreign monies, jobs created, and a very positive start to an energy which could ultimately realise more jobs in Kerry Group, in Tarbert fuel station, which is now going to be a gas generating station, and ultimately a positive thing for our country as well as North Kerry. It is now 2012 and we still haven't resolved this. So it's 11 years later, and the time frame that has been highlighted by the regulator is that they want to have it resolved by October 2014. Well, frankly, Minister, this isn't acceptable. This isn't the kind of conduct that you expect in a commercial and a viable country. I'm personally not happy with the conduct of the regulator. I understand that this is enormously complex, and if I understand that it's complex, there are so many people out there that don't understand it. And it's high time that this was brought to a head on so many fronts. I have made recommendations to Bord Gáis Networks, to Shannon LNG, and to members of the Transport and Communications and Energy Committee that we should have a special Oireachtas committee meeting set up for the purposes of seeing whether or not a judicial review is warranted as a result of the tariffs that are being talked about here. And I'd like to mention the fact that the Brattle Group, who are commissioned by governments and independent gas companies throughout the world, have referred to this and said, in terms of process and managing a legitimate expectation, the CER does not seem to have followed best practice. The CER presented four options in July 2011 consultation paper, and I rejected all of those subsequently.
Thank you. Minister.
Thank you, Concordia, and thank you, to Deputy Spring for again raising this issue. I know he has shown a keen interest in the issue for a very long time now, and I welcome the opportunity to update him and the members of the House on this important issue. The matter raised by Deputy Spring relates to the decision published by the Commission for Energy Regulation on the 29th of June last, relating to the regulatory treatment of the BGE interconnectors and the future gas transmission tariff regime. I trust that this high-level decision provides the degree of regulatory certainty that has been sought by all stakeholders, including Shannon LNG. At the outset, Concordia, let me state again that I've consistently welcomed the proposal by Shannon LNG to construct an LNG terminal near Ballylongford in County Kerry. Such a facility, together with the bringing onshore of Corrib gas, would provide important security of gas supply for Ireland. I met the promoters of the project soon after taking office, and both my department and the Commission for Energy Regulation are in regular contact with Shannon LNG. Together with all players and potential players in Ireland's gas market, Shannon LNG has a key commercial interest in the outcome of the regulator's decision on this complex regulatory question, and given the complexities, there are many different perspectives on what the decision should be. The decision on the regulatory treatment of the gas interconnectors is, as Deputy Spring has said, by law a matter for the Commission for Energy Regulation under the Gas Interim Regulation Act of 2002. The regulator, as the independent energy regulator, has a remit to protect energy consumers, ensure security of supply and support competitiveness. It also has a duty to ensure that new sources of gas for the Irish market do not result in unwarranted increases in the price of gas to business and domestic consumers. Over the last number of months, the regulator itself has been engaged in an extensive consultation process on the matter and has had considerable interaction with Shannon LNG itself, as well as with all key stakeholders. The publication by the regulator on the 17th of February last of a proposed decision paper for consultation was followed by the assessment of stakeholder submissions by the regulator and meetings with several individual stakeholders, including Shannon LNG. The regulator's high-level decision, published on the 29th of June, concludes that the current gas transmission entry tariff regime must be reformed in the light of new sources of gas, such as Corrib and Shannon LNG, coming on stream. The interconnector entry tariff plays a crucial role in determining Irish gas wholesale prices for all customers. Without reform of the system, the reduced flows of gas through the interconnectors due to new sources of gas coming on stream could lead to significant increases in the per unit interconnector tariff. In turn, this would push up prices for gas consumers in Ireland. The decision commits the regulator to the setting of tariffs at each entry point. Tariffs will be set separately on the basis of forward-looking, long-run marginal cost considerations. The new tariff regime is expected to come into effect on October 2014. The SER has decided that a network tariffs liaison group involving stakeholders will be established. The purpose of the group will be to inform the regulator's future decisions on the methodology for setting the LRMC tariffs for each entry point. Following a decision by the regulator on the methodology to apply, the regulator will then issue a direction to GasLink to effect these reforms. I very much hope, Concordia, that all stakeholders, including Shannon LNG, will continue to work with the regulator on this issue.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Spring.
Thank you. This matter must be resolved, and put it in context under the strategic infrastructure planning rules within this country. In 2006, Shannon LNG achieved planning permission within 6 months. However, such people as the regulator took them 18 months to analyse this, and that's back in 2006, and we're now saying that it'll be 2014 before we have any project at all. There's no certainty surrounding this, and for anybody that's looking at putting a substantial investment of between 600 million and €1 billion, there needs to be numbers provided as to what the tariff will be. A business plan is set out and it needs to be pluggable so that they can ultimately decide if it's going to happen. The liaison group should be set up immediately. It should be asked to resolve this matter within the next 6 months, and then Hess and LNG can give a commitment to people as to whether or not they're going to tender for this project to be realised. I would like to point out something else that was said in the Economist Intelligence Unit's report by the Department of the Taoiseach in 2009. Evidence that energy prices in Ireland are high by international standards raises potential questions about the effectiveness of the regulatory regime in the absence of some alternative explanation for such high prices. The regulator's job is not to set artificially low prices, but to ensure that the customers are not paying for more or less than they would in competitive markets. It is high time that we took a look at how our system works. We separated out how Bord Gáis networks work, how the private investors can look at creating jobs, and how they can look at bringing down the price of energy, ultimately creating competitiveness for the consumer, but also for the national well-being. 65% of the energy that's created, ESB that's created in this country, is from gas, and I welcome better sources, and I think that everybody does, but it's too slow. The action by the regulator since 2002 is unacceptable, and I think that the regulatory system needs to be improved to that end. Thank you.
Minister.
Well, Cancolia, as a matter of coincidence, the International Energy Agency today published its review of the effectiveness, efficiency and how competitive is the Irish energy sector. And the Executive Director from Paris was here to launch that document today, and the conclusions of that review are very praiseworthy of the work of the Irish regulator. However, I take Deputy Spring's point, and I can tell him that within days the letters will issue to ensure that the network tariffs liaison group will be set up and to commence that process. Now, it is a matter for others how quickly they will respond to that. I'm also, to some extent, in the dark, Cancolia, in that since the regulator made the decision on the 29th of June, I have not had any response from the company, nor has the regulator, to my knowledge, had any response from the company. So I hope that that's a good sign. I hope that the company is engaging with the decision. You know, I'm disappointed to hear Deputy Spring say that he thinks it won't bring the necessary regulatory certainty, because the whole point of getting the decision, which had been delayed by actions of the company itself in terms of making complaints to Europe, that the regulator nonetheless published its decision on the 29th of June with the whole purpose of giving regulatory certainty.
Thank you.
And you know, the fact that the company has not made any reaction to me or to the regulator, I take some hope from that they will engage in private with the regulator in terms of assessing what precisely are the implications of what, as Deputy Spring has said, is a very complex area.
Thank you.